Picture it. Hotels across America, 2023. A young couple takes a few out-of-state trips. At night, they turn on the TV to get some measure of comfort in their unfamiliar surroundings and channel surf until, bam.
Thank you for being a friend.
The Golden Girls comes on, and so begins a nightly ritual for the couple. They mention this odd routine to friends and family, and finally are informed that the show is available in its entirety on Hulu. At last, the couple rushes to the streaming site as soon as possible, but when they're typing in the name of the show, something weird happens. This show they've never heard of appears. The Golden Palace. Right there in the thumbnail are 3 familiar faces, but where's Dorothy? So many questions were raised, but a little digging revealed the truth. This show was a sequel to The Golden Girls, filmed after B. Arthur left the show, that only lasted for a single season, never to be mentioned again. The couple, who happened to run a YouTube channel, know that they must make a video about this mysterious show, after watching all of The Golden Girls, of course. That couple was us.
What are you doing?
I'm honoring Sophia.
Nice. Anyway, when we first saw Golden Palace show up in the Hulu search, realized we had never heard of it and that it only had 1 season, we assumed it was an absolute disaster and knew we had to make a video about it. But before we get into the meat of the video, we need to talk about the show that started it all. As many of you know, The Golden Girls was a sitcom created by Susan Harris in 1985 that ran until 1992 about 4 middle-aged to elderly women living in a house together in Miami. The 4 main characters were Dorothy Zbornak, the quick-witted, sarcastic one, played by B. Arthur, her mother, Sophia Petrillo, a curmudgeonly and miserly old lady, played by Estelle Getty, Blanche Devereaux, a self-obsessed, sex-addicted Southern belle, played by Rue McClanahan, and Rose Nyland, a naive, childlike farm girl from the fictional town of St. Olaf, Minnesota, played by Betty White. The show revolved around their antics and especially their love lives, as the show wanted to portray the lives of people their age in a more positive way than what was usually shown on TV at the time. It's since become known as one of the most groundbreaking, progressive sitcoms of all time, especially for its time, as it delved into topics like menopause, the AIDS crisis, the treatment of older Americans in the workforce, and 2 episodes where Blanche, the traditional Southern girl, was forced to confront the reality that her younger brother is gay.
Suffice to say, The Golden Girls handled its serious subject matter with the respect and grace that those subjects deserved, while still raking in laughs. The show ran for 7 seasons before coming to an end after B. Arthur, who played Dorothy, decided to leave the show. In the 2-part series finale, Dorothy fell in love with Blanche's uncle Lucas, played by Leslie Nielsen, married him, and moved out of the house to live with him in Atlanta, leaving the other 3 women behind. Instead of simply carrying on without her, they decided to end the show and start a new one.
You'll always be my sisters. Always.
We're here.
Which brings us to the topic of today's video. We're going to look at what happened to this dynamic show after one of its 4 pillars was gone. Could it stay standing or crumble beneath the legacy it built? Let's take a look, episode by episode, at the Golden Palace.
We open on the house we've loved for 7 seasons, now empty.
Wait, hold up. I just need to say, what the hell did they do to the theme song? Listen, here's the theme song from Golden Girls.
Thank you for being a friend. Travel down the road and back again.
See? It's iconic. It's memorable. We played it as the last song at our wedding. Here's the theme song from the Golden Palace.
Thank you for being a friend. Travel down the road and back again.
Need I say more? Carry on.
Anyway, movers empty what little items are left, the wicker couch remains. There's comfort in seeing the return of Blanche's starfish earrings, and as more items exit the house, Rose panics and says that she can't bear to leave. We feel the same. The group is selling the house, having bought a hotel. Blanche makes the correct point that the house has pretty much functioned as a hotel for the last 7 years, and as they chat, Rose has no choice to stay. The movers lift up the couch with the girls still on it, and we're whisked off to our new home, the Golden Palace Hotel. We see some of the new cast first. A kid I instantly found annoying named Oliver, and his foster father, Roland, played by future Avenger Don Cheadle. They both live and work in the hotel, and we learn quickly that the former owners lied to Oliver and Roland about the new hotel owners, our girls, being experienced, and in turn lied to Blanche about how successful the hotel was, its bank payment being due due in 1 week. Otherwise, it closes. Roland is a very charming character, functioning as essentially every role in the hotel.
Mr. Sinclair, you still haven't got those towels yet? Well, I'm surprised. I sent somebody up there 10 minutes ago. Yes, a rather charming young black man. Well, why don't you give him another 30 seconds? All right. Mr. Sinclair. Excuse me.
We learn that Oliver's parents are deadbeats, his dad is in jail, and his mother is a drunk. Sophia heads to the kitchen as this will be her domain, but she is met with the head chef Chewy, played by Cheech Marin. They butt heads on the style of food to be cooked, Sophia wanting Italian and Chewy wanting Mexican, which causes him to quit. Roland, Chewy, Oliver, and a pool guy named Brad are the only staff available in this 42-room hotel. The situation is desperate, and Rose wishes Dorothy was there to beat up Blanche for getting them into this, even though they all agreed to it. After a brief conversation of essentially, let's get to work, Blanche says that they'll be thankful in a week, and I expected a jump cut of them suffering and yelling at Blanche, but this doesn't happen. We see a bit of them working. Blanche flirts Brad into staying, Sophia calling her crass things as she passes.
Oh, I'm so glad. Lying tramp.
And someone sends food back to the kitchen.
Excellent, thank you.
Now that's really dry. Look, it's just like being in the Sahara Desert.
Whoa.
That might just be the worst food I've ever come across.
My favorite part of this episode comes when Rose gets held at gunpoint by a robber. He wants access to the safe, and Rose calls Roland to come help. She seemingly thinks he's a guest from out of town due to the ski mask. He gets impatient and heads to another hotel. Rose calls the police.
Hello? There's a male Caucasian, 6 feet tall, about 175 pounds, probably mid-30s. He's wearing a ski mask, brown eyes, prominent Adam's apple. He's carrying a .357 Magnum. And he's on his way to the Carlton Hotel. Who am I? Just a citizen who isn't quite as stupid as everybody thinks she is. Oh, I'm sorry. This is 411?
She almost had it. This reminded me of the time Rose was a reporter at a dog show in the Golden Girls and seemed to be unaware of the robbery going on. So Rose seems to be learning. Chewie returns, asking for his job back.
I'm back.
Dorothy?
He's going through a divorce and really needs it. They agree to compromise. Apparently 1 week went by as Blanche congratulates the group. They did it. They saved the hotel, even though we didn't really get to see it happen. They discuss how running the hotel is exciting to them and has given their lives a new purpose. They toast to happiness, life, and being together. During the end credits scene, we see the girls at a table with Oliver, Roland, and Chewie beginning a new cheesecake ritual. We both thought that the shift from the girls just living together to running a hotel was kind of a weird gimmick, but this episode was still funny, and we expected it would take a few episodes to really miss Dorothy.
This episode opens with a dilemma that's going to become increasingly common in this show. Business is slow, and everyone needs to come up with a solution to drum up some extra cash. Rose, who has connections in a local TV station that she used to work at, comes up with a legitimately good idea to have a local talk show regularly plug the hotel in exchange for having the show's guests stay at the hotel. However, this ties into the main conflict of the episode, which is Blanche trying really hard to assert her dominance over the others. When Rose tells Blanche about the deal she struck, everyone else congratulates her on coming up with a good idea, but Blanche is simply upset that Rose didn't run this by her first. At the same time, Roland and Blanche keep butting heads, as Roland is having none of Blanche's ego trip and is determined to knock her down a few pegs since he knows that she's completely inexperienced and hasn't really earned her inflated opinion of herself. This is also a good time to talk about Golden Palace's tendency to have kind of random celebrity cameos, some of which firmly cement this show in the early 90s. In this case, the celebrity in question is Bobcat Goldthwait, a comedian who was mostly famous in the 90s for yelling in a funny voice.
I'm doing the Barbara LeGrand show tomorrow. Could I get my room, please?
Bobcat's character is the guest that the TV show sent to stay with them, and his odd mannerisms freak out Blanche and Roland. Well, that and the show he's doing is called Killers Who Were Set Free, which caused them to think he's going to murder them. Also, haha, Cheech makes a weed joke.
Wait a minute. Blanche, I'm shocked.
Do I look like the kind of guy that would smoke marijuana?
For those of you who are unaware, Cheech and Maureen came to prominence in the comedy scene as part of a stoner comedy duo with Tommy Chong called Cheech and Chong. Eventually, Blanche and Roland come to an understanding, and Blanche realizes that she needs to be more appreciative of everyone's efforts and remember that she's not the sole owner of the hotel, as Rose and Sophia also own it. The last real joke of the episode is the reveal that Bobcat's character is in fact not a killer, but a psychologist who will be interviewing the released killers. However, he tells his entire panel of hardened murderers to go stay at the Golden Palace Hotel.
With this episode, we finally get mention of Miles, Rose's boyfriend since season 5 of The Golden Girls. Brief aside, the actor that played Miles played Rose's short-lived boyfriend Arnie in season 1 of the original show. Miles has once again canceled a date, something that Blanche notes has been happening a lot. Rose had intended for the evening to get romantic. She even shaved above the knee. A throwback to this moment.
I prefer to be smooth under my arms and from my ankle to the top of my thigh.
Get out of here.
Why?
You shave above the knee?
Well, of course.
Get out of here.
Which also shows character development. Miles has not even been to see the hotel yet, and well,
it's been a long time since we played cards.
Really? How long has it been since you played cards?
Almost 3 months. If I don't get my deck shuffled soon...
This also shows the great character development for Rose because she's not only understanding, but also using a double entendre. Meanwhile, Oliver has a side plot where he's trying to earn money fast. The why isn't significant, but I want to point out that it's surprising Sophia didn't take part in the get-rich scheme since she frequently did this in the original series. Before Rose leaves the room, she tells a St. Olaf story about her and her sister having had a kissing booth where they kissed each other rather than pay people to kiss them. She says old men in raincoats were the frequent buyers of this spectacle. I bring this up because I have a running theory that St. Olaf was a cult. As we go along, you might agree. Blanche happens to see Miles' name frequently in the hotel's guest ledger that dates back to 1985, the air date of The Golden Girls, and assumes Miles has been coming to the hotel to cheat on Rose. Roland notes Miles Weber as the hotel's best customer and that he hasn't stopped in for a while. Blanche surmises it's because Rose is now an owner and he doesn't want to be caught. Blanche enters the kitchen and wishes Dorothy was there to ask for advice while drinking from a cup from the original set. A Miles cheat scare is nothing new. This plot happened more than a few times in the original show. Blanche has made Rose worry about him before, but she's always been proven wrong. When Blanche tells Rose, she does say he's been having a lot of meetings at night. Miles arrives coincidentally, and Rose instantly accuses him. Blanche says they know he's been cheating. He's shocked and insists that he's never been to this hotel, mad at Blanche. Rose says he's never loved her and storms off, creating a scene in the lobby which Roland cleverly pretends is a theater stint by the hotel. This becomes a wonderful running joke. Roland realizes who Miles Weber is and explains that the only one he knows is an entirely different person. Then, 2 hours later, Roland learns Blanche didn't tell Rose what they learned, and he must break the news to her. Rose is furious, and we get our next hotel scene.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, our friendship is over.
Yes.
Miles and Rose have dinner at the hotel, and we learn Rose hired an ex-Green Beret to cut Miles' brakes, but chose not to. And then this happens.
The very idea of you cheating on me. It's really silly when you think of it.
Rose, we have to talk.
Why? Miles met a grieving waitress and the relationship grew into more. This crushed us. We loved Miles. He was the longest relationship in the series and he was sweet and charming, a good guy. They had briefly been engaged in season 7, but this didn't come from nowhere. In that episode of the show, Dorothy and Miles shared a kiss. While passing it off as moonlight madness during a full moon, it still put enough doubt to put off the engagement, which had only occurred after Rose won a trip to France. This instance seems to have shaken the strength of their relationship after all, and Rose ends the relationship.
Well, as if you don't know by now that I'm the only one for you, there's nothing to work out.
Oh, no, Rose.
I just want you to leave.
Rose, don't.
This episode begins with everyone teasing Oliver about his new girlfriend, which isn't really relevant other than giving Roland a reason to feel insecure about his role as foster parent, since he feels ill-equipped to give him the talk. On that note, Oliver looks like he's about 10, so it's kind of weird, although he does say he's going to be learning about it next semester, which might mean he's actually in high school, since I don't think middle school tends to phrase school terms like that, or teach sex ed at all. However, the entire discussion about Oliver's girlfriend made us realize that other than her flirting with Brad in the first episode, Blanche hasn't really pursued any men so far in this show. However, this then made us realize a problem, which is that this show relies on the audience having already watched Golden Girls in order to understand all the jokes about Blanche being promiscuous, since she, again, hasn't really demonstrated that so far in this show. Anyway, the main plot of the episode revolves around Rose befriending a hotel guest named Vivian, who's quickly revealed to suffer from some sort of dementia, since she believes that Rose is her daughter Charlene. Despite Blanche and Roland both telling her that she needs to inform the police about Vivian, Rose instead chooses to keep Vivian at the hotel and take care of her, since she always regretted putting her own mother in a home for the last few months of her life. Since I don't really know where else to talk about this, the B-plot of the episode is that Sophia learns that people keep calling the hotel to order Chinese food since they share a name with a Chinese restaurant, and starts using the kitchen to fill out their orders and steal the restaurant's customers to make a quick buck. Now there's the Sophia we know and love. However, I'm not going to dwell on this plot since it makes quite a few questionable jokes. Anyway, back to the main plot. Eventually, Vivian becomes too difficult to take care of, and Rose is able to be convinced that calling the police would be the best thing for her, since her family might be looking for her, and notifying the police is the best chance her family has at finding her. She makes the call, and Sophia is left to watch Vivian in the dining room. However, Vivian leaves the room to make some tea, so Sophia is alone when the cops arrive, and she's taken by mistake.
Quick note, this was probably horrendously traumatizing for Sophia, because Dorothy had put her in a retirement home called Shady Pines against her will and only came to move back in with her after the home burned down, possibly by Sophia herself. However, it was quickly revealed that Shady Pines treated its residents more like prisoners, so getting sent back to the home became the one thing Sophia was most afraid of.
The mistake is only ever corrected a few hours later when the police are able to get in touch with Vivian's daughter Charlene, who comes down to the station and informs them that Sophia is in fact not Vivian, so they go back to the hotel to get Vivian. Rose, seeing Charlene be so relieved at finding her mother, made her realize the error of her ways. Also, Sophia's Chinese food scam is shut down by Roland.
This episode isn't that memorable. I noted that the transition music has changed, though. The main problem here is that the hotel is overbooked, and currently they don't have liability insurance because Rose accidentally closed the pool with people inside. This leads them to hire another chef, which happens to be the man that Chewie's ex-wife cheated with. He's also Chewie's childhood best friend. This is also a potential liability because of the hostility here. Even more crazy is that the hotel is overbooked with lawyers and bikers. And I love that they make fun of the lawyers before the bikers. Classic Golden Girls. They must have at least one biker and a lawyer share a room, to which everyone is worried there'll be a problem. But nothing really occurs. They end up getting along, and even Chewie and his friend make up. One of the many cases where the conflict resolves without anyone needing to do anything.
In this episode, Blanche and Rose realize that Roland hasn't taken a day off since they took over the hotel and decide that they need to find him a date. Blanche ultimately decides to not get involved in Roland's love life, though a comment she makes about being more knowledgeable about love than Rose is causes Rose's competitive streak to kick in. She sets up a blind date for Roland, and Blanche panics and asks the first black woman that she can find about dating him, who just so happens to be their butcher making a delivery. Roland rightfully calls her out on picking a date simply because she's black. However, the woman Rose picked is also black, but more conventionally attractive, so he's fine with it. The B-plot, which is also not much to write home about, is about Sophia getting upset that Chewie will be featured on a TV show and continually tries to sabotage him. After Oliver mentions that Roland's ex-girlfriend was really pretty, Blanche decides to give her a call and pretend that Roland wants to get back together. However, what she doesn't know is that Roland's ex-girlfriend is extremely overbearing and he hates her. He's afraid to tell her the truth, as he's afraid she won't be able to handle it. But Rose convinces him to just tell her as, quote, "She's not a child, everyone loves the truth." This is likely a result of what happened with Miles. Roland eventually tells her the truth, and it goes better than he feared it would. However, as she leaves, she reveals that she only liked Roland because he was the only man that wasn't after her considerable inheritance. Roland clearly just didn't know about her inheritance, but notably doesn't chase after her when she leaves.
Chewie and Roland are meshing into the group well and seem to begin to know even the silliest little things.
Chewie went 4.
What, somebody scare Sophia?
Today, Chewie's going to sign his divorce papers, and that's not the only interesting thing about today. Dorothy's coming to visit. It's been 4 months since the last time she saw the group, and this is her first visit to the hotel. I love that earlier, when the girls were sharing stories with the boys about Dorothy, Blanche was again drinking out of the cup from the original set. Just before Dorothy enters, Chewie returns, feeling a bit down after signing the divorce papers, and Roland encourages him to flirt with the first woman he sees.
Oye, mamacita! Do you move as good as you look?
Walk away now and no one gets hurt.
You must be Dorothy.
Then she meets Roland as she's giving her overcharging cab driver a piece of her mind.
Walk away now and no one gets hurt.
You must be Dorothy.
I assume we've never actually seen Dorothy be violent because it would change the show's rating, but to me it seemed like they were making her out to be more of a brute than she really was. She's always had more bark than bite in my eyes. And yeah, I know that's the joke. Chewie doesn't come into work the next morning, and the girls have to work extra hard to keep up with a once again overbooked hotel. This causes Dorothy to become concerned about how much physical labor Sophia is doing and expresses worry. Secretly, she calls her husband Lucas to say that Sophia may have to come home and live with them. Chewie returns later, obviously hungover, and married to a random woman from the bar Roland took him to last night. Blanche advises him that marriage is not something you should jump into, and it reminded me of the plot of the very first episode of Golden Girls, where Blanche is almost married to someone she met briefly, a bigamist, someone who marries multiple people. This was unknown to her, and clearly it affected how she views commitment. Dorothy helps pitch in with work at the hotel, but clearly isn't cut out for the hospitality business.
Rose, do we have anything that gets out stains?
No, I don't think we do. Why do you ask?
Hey, this is my best suit!
I spilled something.
This is a good excuse for her not to be a frequent visitor on the show. Later, Dorothy wants to talk to the girls, and they jubilantly begin readying a cheesecake.
We're going to be talking about sex, aren't we?
Duh.
And they have a talk about Dorothy's experiences with Lucas, which is weird because she's Blanche's uncle, but then it gets serious. Dorothy tells them that Sophia should come to live with her. Blanche and Rose affirm that Sophia is an integral employee of the hotel and that she can't go. All the while, nobody lets Sophia get a word in edgewise. And when they tell her that she must choose or they will, she leaves the room, saddened that she's being forced to choose between her daughter and her surrogate ones. The next morning, they find that she's gone. Sophia has run away.
Episode 8, the second part of the Dorothy arc, begins with Blanche single-handedly trying to keep the hotel running while Rose and Dorothy are out looking for the runaway Sophia. Meanwhile, Chewie's personal problems are causing his work to slip. For example, his meatloaf keeps ending up dry, which only further adds to all the fires Blanche is trying to put out. Rose and Dorothy soon return empty-handed, and the three girls are at each other's throats. Rose and Blanche blame Sophia running away on Dorothy, trying to force her to choose who to live with, while Dorothy ultimately believes that it's Rose and Blanche's fault, as if they hadn't worked Sophia so hard, she never would have worried about her so much. Interestingly, and adding on to the point Shai made last episode, this argument is really the first time that Blanche and Rose have been shown to be genuinely afraid of Dorothy hurting them, instead of just moving on as if it's bluster. Dorothy then leaves to keep looking for her mother, and the argument is forced to wait to resolve until later. Finally, there's a breakthrough when Rose has enough of Dorothy's attitude and stands up to her, ultimately hitting Dorothy on the head with a newspaper, something Dorothy often did to Rose back in the Golden Girls. Dorothy being hit causes her to actually start crying, and all three girls then tearfully air out their feelings towards each other. Blanche and Rose have been mad at Dorothy for the last 4 months, since her wedding and departure were so sudden that they felt like she had abandoned them, and Dorothy reveals that she was upset because she felt like they didn't need her anymore, since they didn't even call to ask for advice or anything when they bought the hotel. The three girls have a tear-filled makeup group hug, with Dorothy also openly wondering when Rose became the strong one. Meanwhile, Chewie's wife's ex-boyfriend stops by and threatens Chewie's life if he ever does anything to hurt her. A cab driver then arrives with Sophia's purse, and I just want to point out that the cab driver is played by a not famous yet Jack Black. Remember that thing I said earlier about the cameos in this show being like a time capsule? Yeah, it's so weird seeing someone who's now such a huge star in a bit part like this. However, that's not the important part of his appearance.
Picked her up, Golden Palace 705, dropped her off at a place called Shady Pines.
Yes, Sophia willingly returned to Shady Pines. Like we said before, this was the abusive nursing home that Dorothy had sent Sophia to once. However, there's an interesting development. Back in the Golden Girls, whenever Sophia would talk about how poorly she was treated at Shady Pines, such as claiming that they forced their residents to eat dog food, Dorothy would always indicate that Sophia was greatly exaggerating, if not outright lying. However, now Dorothy admits that Sophia's exaggerations were only slight, if she was even exaggerating at all.
She's in the middle of her exercise period.
Oh my God, that's code for picking up litter on the interstate.
They call Sophia.
They have a phone now?
And she tells them that she'd rather die alone in that hellhole than have the three of them hate each other because of her. The three girls, of course, rush to her rescue. However, when they get to Shady Pines, they discover that it has apparently been reformed into something that more closely resembles a spa resort than a retirement home. Dorothy, however, is convinced it's just a front.
What have you done with my mother, you Nazi?
Security.
Sophia initially refuses to leave, but is able to be convinced to come back to the hotel to discuss things when it's pointed out that she can't afford to keep living at Shady Pines. To resolve Chewy's problem, he tells his wife that her old boyfriend came by. This prompts her to reveal that this whole thing was a stunt by her to make him jealous, and that they were never legally married. She leaves, and there's that taken care of. The next day, Sophia breaks the news to Dorothy that she isn't going home with her. Being at Shady Pines made her realize that she doesn't want to be waited on hand and foot, as it makes her feel old. At the Golden Palace, she's at least needed and people depend on her, which helps her feel young. But she assures Dorothy that when she's finally ready to rest, she'll let her know. Rose and Blanche arrive to see Dorothy off, and Dorothy accepts how much they've grown. She initially thought this whole hotel thing wasn't going to last, but she's reminded of just how special they are, and she tells them she's proud of them. In return, the girls give Dorothy a lifetime pass to the Golden Palace. Things begin to get hectic, and the girls split up to handle the many problems in the hotel. Dorothy quietly slips out the front door, giving a final, wistful look at her friends' new lives. They've moved on and grown, and so too must she. And with the ending of this episode, also comes the end of B. Arthur's final appearance as Dorothy.
Blanche is finally exhibiting thirsty behavior, even Rose and Sophia are, over a hotel guest named Nick. He seems to have been staying a week and will be checking out soon, only he's having trouble getting the bank to wire money for him to write a check. In response to this, the girls ask Nick to pay his bill by working for them at the hotel in exchange for waiving the bill. The strange lead to this, though, is that they ask him to do whatever job he normally has for them at the hotel, which doesn't make sense if he were a lawyer or a bus driver or literally anything besides maybe a handyman. It's just a weird way for him to admit being a male escort. He ends up washing dishes instead. Nick told the girls what he usually does is provide rich old ladies with comfort in exchange for money or goods. He seeks out sugar mamas. And it's not long before it's obvious that Blanche has become his latest sugar mama. Obvious to everyone but Blanche. This leads to my favorite scene of Rose ever. Right before Nick makes his escape with his biggest grift ever, asking Blanche for thousands to leave for his hometown, saying he's turning over a new leaf, Nick steps into the kitchen and Rose confronts him.
Your hometown doesn't exist. You're not a gigolo, Nick. You're a con artist.
This scares him into leaving without taking the money.
Sweetheart, I'm at a loss for words. Some words just came to me.
Oh, look, it's almost time for my favorite show, Cops.
He leaves and Blanche never finds out the truth. Rose was protecting her happiness. This episode is also where I took notice of Roland and Chewy being able to have fun and interesting plots outside of the girls. In this episode, the two are off attending a self-help seminar from an author Roland really likes, and they end up walking across hot coals. Overall, the banter was great and the segments were enjoyable.
It was at this point we started to notice that Oliver was really rarely in this show. In fact, there's an entire separate version of the intro that removes all mention of him at all. Honestly, we don't really miss him. Anyway, this episode revolves around two famous comedy disc jockeys coming to visit the hotel to broadcast their show, played by Tim Conway and Harvey Korman. Once again, time capsule. These two actors were best known at the time as supporting actors on the Carol Burnett Show. When the DJs get there, Sophia talks to them about a show they used to do called Playing Pranks on Stupid People. Sophia thinks Rose would be the perfect target for a prank, as her naivety and childlike innocence is often confused with sheer stupidity. The broadcast begins, and the DJs spring their trap on Rose. One of them gets into a tank of water, and Rose is told that he'll be let out if she can answer 3 trivia questions. The other host then delays her until she's convinced that the one in the tank drowned. Rose is horrified, and Sophia is eventually convinced to tell Rose the truth that it was just a prank. However, just as she tries to tell the truth, the dead DJ shows up as a ghost and chases Rose into the back office. Several gunshots are heard, and Rose comes back out holding a revolver. Sophia is now horrified that Rose just killed the DJ, only for Rose to reveal that the entire thing was actually a prank being pulled on Sophia. They told Rose about it as soon as Sophia brought it up, as they felt anyone that vindictive truly deserves it. At the same time, Roland's parents are coming down for a visit, and Roland has a feeling that they have some bad news for him. Specifically, he thinks they're going to tell him that his dog died. When Roland's parents arrive, they finally tell him their bad news. They're getting a divorce, and his dog died. Blanche briefly tries to play marriage counselor, but it doesn't work. Roland is devastated.
Before we begin this episode, we want to point out that an alternate version of the theme song plays depending on if Oliver is in the episode, usually. However, this time the version with him played even though he's not in the episode at all. You may have seen this episode making the rounds a few years ago during the 2020 round of the Black Lives Matter movement. This episode sees Blanche host an organization called the Daughters of the Traditional South, whom Roland refers to as bigots in bonnets.
This is actually the third time this group was mentioned in this continuity, with the other 2 times being in the Golden Girls. The last time they showed up, they were called the Daughters of the Old South, and they kicked Blanche out when she learned that someone in her family tree was not only from New York and thus a Yankee, but also Jewish, which they saw as even worse. The first time they were mentioned, they used the group's real-world name, the Daughters of the Confederacy. Let me just tell you, these women suck! You know the myth certain kinds of people really like spreading that the Civil War was actually fought over states' rights and not slavery? Yeah, that myth came from these degenerates trying to rewrite history. Bigots in bonnets is probably the nicest thing anyone can really call them.
They're meeting at the hotel, and Blanche hangs up the Confederate flag for them. This rightfully makes Roland uncomfortable, and he tries to get the message across to Blanche. Roland quits in protest when she refuses to listen to his side. Where he sees a symbol of divide and violence, Blanche sees barbecues and reunions, and unfortunately, unhealthy cousin love.
And Cousin Rex would be home on vacation from Colonel Bob's school for bad boys. He'd ask me for the favor, other than the dancing favor.
Later, in front of the bigots in bonnets, Roland does a meek slave impression in front of them to mock them before leaving the room. However, Blanche finally begins to realize what Roland was talking about when one of the women refers to him as one of the good ones. She follows after him and is finally willing to see his side.
But can't you see, Blanche, that flag ties what you believe and what she believes together. Look, I'm telling you, the legacy of that flag is alive every time I walk down the street with a group of my friends and I see a white person cross over to the other side because they're afraid. Or look, when I'm in the elevator with somebody like you and you're all huddled over in the corner wondering what I'm gonna do, sometimes I just want to go, oh. Just to break the tension. So please don't tell me about that flag. I've battled that flag all my life.
This whole conversation puts Blanche's whole life into a new perspective that she can't seem to bear and refuses to acknowledge at first. But his speech really makes her reconsider, and Roland stays. There's a side plot where we see some fallout from the scars Miles left behind on Rose. A couple checks in under the very stereotypical last name of Smith, a generic name for hotel adulterers. She becomes obsessed with the couple and tries to intervene in their foray, seemingly taking it personal, showing how much Miles's infidelity hurt her.
As you can probably tell from the title, this is the season's obligatory Christmas episode, and they decided to cheap out and just do a Christmas Carol parody. This episode revolves around Chewie playing the Scrooge role as he hates Christmas after a particularly embarrassing childhood experience where he had to walk around his father's restaurant dressed as a layer cake with whipped cream in his hat. At the same time, a group of people that have Christmas-related trauma made everyone else take down their decorations, which makes Chewie happy. The B-plot can once again be summarized in a single sentence. Roland is asked to be Santa at the local children's hospital, and Rose coaches him on how to be the best Santa he can be. That night, Chewie has a Dickensian dream where he's Scrooge and the girls are the three spirits. First, Rose visits him as the ghost of Christmas past, where he sees the humiliating cake costume that made him hate Christmas in the first place. However, he realizes now that his father was just trying his best to spread Christmas cheer to all his customers. Blanche then visits as the ghost of Christmas presents, where he sees everyone having to celebrate Christmas in the freezer so the Christmas haters don't see or hear them. Finally, Sophia visits him as the ghost of Christmas yet to come, where he sees a future in which he bought the hotel and doesn't allow them to celebrate Christmas and forced Sophia to wear the cake costume. Chewie then wakes up from his dream and goes to tell the others that he's a changed man. However, he finds them all dead, frozen in the freezer. He then wakes up for real and crashes the large group's anti-Christmas seminar to tell them about his experience. To everyone else's shock, he leads them through the lobby and singing Christmas carols. I mean, it's no Muppet Christmas Carol. It's a bad episode. What do you want from me?
A constant in this show is just how tight the financial situation is at the hotel. This time, the oven is broken and they can't afford to fix it. Blanche mentions that she keeps sleeping with the repairman, but he never actually stays to fix anything. They find that money is continuously missing from the bottom line, and everyone begins to accuse each other of stealing. And we have the first jump cut of the series.
Not her. Who's next?
Well, how about Sophia?
Sophia, don't be ridiculous. Why, she would never steal from us. Sophia's been like a mother to me for these last 8 years. Why, I wouldn't dream of accusing her. All right, you little witch, where's the money?
In the end, they discover that Blanche has been spending some of the hotel money on personal expenses, not realizing that is embezzlement. Miles has been trying to get a hold of Rose, leaving messages that she refuses to listen to. Rose knows that Miles wants to get her back, but she isn't giving in. A woman named Fern comes to the hotel on the lookout for a wedding venue. She's getting married in 2 days. With money so tight, they need the business. Rose decides to help her plan. The fiancé nowhere to be seen during this process. Meanwhile, Rose decides to get back together with Miles. She has even been calling him in the middle of the night over the past few weeks to taunt him about what he lost.
Just to hear the cute things he says. Don't you know what time it is? This happens again, I'm calling the police. Who the hell is this? And then, before I hang up, I always say, "You blew it big time, smart boy."
And he doesn't recognize your voice?
No. I talked to him through a kazoo.
Miles decides that showing up to the hotel is the only way he's going to be able to speak to Rose.
You know him?
He is surprised not to see Rose, but to see Fern, his fiancée. Rose finally gets to say her piece.
This was supposed to be our day, our wedding, our life. Well, you blew it big time, smart boy.
Oh my God, she's the kazoo woman.
Supposedly, Fern did not know who Rose was, so her being here is not in spite but pure coincidence. As Rose sets up the wedding, Miles tries to apologize for the situation. Rose says that she's a professional, but clearly is still hurting.
What are these stones for?
I thought we'd throw them instead of rice.
Despite this, she begs Miles to keep the wedding at the hotel.
No, Rose, this is not right. I can't get married here.
No, damn it, you can't do this to me. You have to get married here. Miles, don't you understand? It's not the business. It's not the money. It's me. I have to see you get married. I need to know that our relationship is over. I want to get on with my life, too.
I understand.
The day of the wedding, Fern gets cold feet, and it's Rose who gives her a pep talk and encourages her to go out there.
Are you okay? You're doing the right thing, honey. I want you to know that.
Oh, I know. I'm happy, really. I am.
Are you sure?
You know me. I always cry at weddings.
Blanche is planning a sweet 16 for their banker's daughter, but keeps blowing off the planning of the party to go out on dates. Meanwhile, Roland learns that Oliver's mother is out of rehab, and the government has decided that Oliver can go back to live with her. Roland is sad about it, but accepts that there's really nothing he can do about it.
There's also this comment.
What's my name?
Hey, man, who is that?
Yeah, man, who is this? Oh, it's a guy from the government.
The name's Bob. Bob Clark.
Give me the phone, Bob. Hey, man, I'm telling you, white it up. Hello, this is Roland. Can I help you? It's a guy from the Department of Social Services. They're checking up on Oliver. Oh.
Hey there, hi there, ho there.
As the party gets closer and closer, Blanche starts completely blowing off the planning and all her other responsibilities, which starts to really infuriate Rose and Roland, who have to pick up the slack. Sophia steals a guest's car and takes Oliver with her on a joyride.
Boy, this car's got a good radio.
Oh, thank God. You hear it too?
Of course, Oliver's mother arrives at the hotel to pick him up while they're gone, but this causes absolutely no complications to the process of him going back to live with her. Blanche eventually tries to blow off the party entirely, but realizes after a conversation with Rose that she's reverting to her old man-chasing ways because it's something familiar that she knows she's good at. The hotel business scares her, and she wanted that familiar comfort. But she wants to be more independent, so she gets her act together and recommits herself to her job and the party, which we don't see. Another thing we don't see is Oliver actually leaving the show. He's just gone. I'm sure you've noticed by now that we've barely talked about him, and it's because he's really had very little impact on any of the plot lines he was involved in. Hell, it took us several episodes before we even realized that he hadn't been in half of them. He was such a nothing character, and even his exit felt half-baked. Throughout the season, Roland's role as his foster father was very underdeveloped as a concept. They didn't seem to know what to do with him, so they just wrote him out halfway through. With how incomplete it felt, it seemed like this was a concept they were planning to revisit, but never got around to.
Dr. Ursula, the love doctor, is coming to do a seminar at the hotel. She's an in-universe doctor that writes controversial books about intimate topics and is likely based off the real-life Ruth Westheimer. Sophia wants to go to the seminar, but it's for couples only. Sophia tries to get sympathy.
I think I've lost my sex appeal. I said I think I've lost my sex appeal.
Oh, no, you still got it, baby. You're a hot babe.
You're just being condescending to an old lady, but I'm a person, damn it. If you prick me, do I not bleed? Eventually.
Which is a reference to these two jokes from Golden Girls.
Hey, I didn't invent Kid Pepe. I just conformed to your image of a simple-minded Hispanic fighter. Well, I am a Cuban, but hath not a Cuban eyes? If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die?
Yes, I am a Yankee, but hath not a Yankee eyes? Hath not a Yankee hands? If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? Sometimes all night, I've heard her.
Sophia signs her and Roland up for the couple's seminar, and we also learned that she sexually harassed Roland at one point.
You can forget that. I've seen that look in your eye before. That's the same look you had when you asked me to fix your shower.
What was wrong with that?
You were using it at the time?
She eventually gets Roland to go by getting him to admit he's having trouble connecting to the woman he takes on dates. Unfortunately, the seminar requires an intimate compatibility survey. He has Chewie help her fill it out. The seminar is awkward.
No touching.
You see what I have to put up with? Now look deeply into your partner's eyes and say, "Hello, lover."
But Roland learns to express his feelings and be in touch with his emotional side. Blanche has an old crush named Taylor coming to visit the hotel, and it's revealed that Blanche lost him to another woman. Taylor arrives and instantly has the hots for Rose. Blanche at first says she has no problem with Rose and Taylor seeing each other, but tells Roland this means war, which begins with Blanche sabotaging Rose's housekeeping and stealing Taylor for the evening. Turns out she froze the toilet paper.
Norwegian people don't get even.
I thought you were Swedish.
I am.
To get back at Blanche, Rose calls the restaurant and pretends the hotel is on fire.
Don't worry, Blanche. I was able to put that fire out with all the cold toilet paper in the freezer.
As they fight over Taylor, he suggests they all go to dinner the next night. He kisses Rose and shucks Blanche's cheek. They exchange blatant savagery.
You offered to open his baked potato with your tongue.
Little miss, oh, I dropped my corn on the cob right down my cleavage. Can somebody help me get it out?
And push Taylor to choose between them in a hypothetical scenario. He picks Rose no matter how hard Blanche tries. They step aside, and Rose helps Blanche to see that she has always been basing her self-worth on what men think of her, and that her competing for men has driven away so many friendships. They apologize and hug. Rose really is the strong one, and she gets Blanche to practice some self-restraint and stay in the kitchen while Rose goes back out to Taylor.
I chose a female friendship over a relationship with a man. So this is what it feels like to be totally, completely selfless. Feels a lot like appendicitis.
We begin this episode with the hotel receiving a notice that the owner of the hotel next door is planning to sue them over a dispute regarding who the parking lot belongs to, and the girls are going to invite him over to the hotel to negotiate and try to prevent the lawsuit. We then see Roland, Chewie, and Brad the pool boy come in after playing a beach volleyball game since they're participating in a tournament. Blanche's flirting with Brad then veers straight into legitimate sexual harassment.
I'm not gonna bite you.
Oh, well, you did last time.
You really do scare him, you know.
Oh, for heaven's sake, I'm just teasing him. I don't mean anything by it.
What about the time you showed him the attachments to your back massager?
Chewie also confides in Rose that he's sad because Roland and Brad won't let him play, which is understandable because he stinks. But he's still upset about that because him being bad at sports as a kid caused him to get bullied, with people calling him Senor Stinky. Rose agrees to talk to Roland and Brad about letting Chewie play. Blanche then starts flirting with the bank manager over the phone, finally getting the others to explain to her why this is such a problem. Her being a shameless flirt is fine in her personal life, but it's just plain sexual harassment when she does it in what's supposed to be a professional setting. Roland even tells her that Brad hasn't told her anything because he's afraid of losing his job if he outright rejects her, even though he's uncomfortable with all the flirting.
Honestly, he feels that at some point he's going to have to sleep with you in order to keep this job.
Blanche then decides that instead of relying on her sex appeal, she's going to be purely professional from now on. This is kind of a common issue with Blanche. She's a deeply flawed person, but also inherently selfish, so she needs to have it explained to her clearly why her behavior is frequently such a problem for other people, like the Confederate flag episode from earlier. We see the volleyball game, and Chewie learns that Rose was actually allowed to join the volleyball team since she played in high school and impressed Roland. As usual, Roland and Brad are hogging the field, but Rose convinces them to let her and Chewie play. However, it turns out that while Rose has good technique, she can't think quick enough to play. Meanwhile, Chewie just plain sucks. Roland and Brad take over and win. Blanche finally has her meeting with the other hotel owner named Mr. Gentry, played by the well-known silver fox Ricardo Montalban. Blanche is trying to keep things professional, but Mr. Gentry is just as proficient at flirting as she is, making it very difficult to keep up her willpower.
Please sit down.
Thank you.
Tea?
Yes.
One hump or two?
During the next volleyball game, Brad twists his ankle, forcing Roland to let Chewie join the game. He initially hogs the ball and doesn't actually allow Chewie to play until Chewie tells him how much being excluded hurts. However, he instantly chokes and they lose the game, proving that he's still Senor Stinky. Blanche and Mr. Gentry reach an agreement as they'll share the parking space at different times depending on when each hotel is more busy. Now that the business is over, they're making arrangements to start seeing each other. For the record, we never see him again. This episode has a pretty funny end credit scene where Chewie is playing volleyball against Roland and winning, only for the camera to pan out and reveal that Roland is blindfolded and has a hand and foot tied behind his back.
Another ploy for money. They decide to host a comedy club at the hotel. Chewie wants to enter with the stage name Corny.
The funniest word in the world is corn.
Corn!
Blanche's son Matthew is coming to visit. This is the first we've seen of any of Blanche's supposed 5 sons. We've only met Becky and Janet. We hear more about how Janet is an absentee mother, and after watching through the series, you realize it's because that's how Blanche raised her. Matthew arrives, and we see that he's played by Bill Engvall, a now well-known comedian, which is funny because Matthew wants to become a comedian. And even funnier when you learn Bill Engvall was just starting his full-time comedy career. When Matthew tries to tell Blanche about wanting to stop being a stockbroker and instead do comedy, she first thinks he's going to say that he's gay, which is character growth for Blanche because she really fought accepting her brother being gay in Golden Girls. Instead, she'd rather have that than him become a comedian. Blanche never seems to learn that nothing good comes from shaming her kids for their life decisions. Roland tries to help Chewie write jokes, and we see that Roland is too stiff. Eventually, Blanche accepts Matthew as a comedian because George would have loved seeing Matthew chase the dream he never did. However, we never even get to see Matthew or Chewie perform at the end of the episode. Instead, a real-life famous comedian named George Burns guest stars. We had to Google him. He's way before our time. The other plotline is a little more serious. A mattress salesman arrives at the hotel and... the man, Bill, looks exactly like Charlie, Rose's deceased husband. And now we know what all the girls' husbands looked like. Bill eventually asks Rose out on a date and she can't seem to refuse. He reminds her so much of Charlie. Bill's wife died 7 years ago, which is weird because according to the latest and ever-changing number of years since Charlie's death, it's also been 7 years. Sophia tells Blanche that Rose has been pretending Bill is Charlie, a secret she didn't want to tell.
How would you like me to iron those wrinkles out of your face, you little snitch?
That was such a Dorothy thing to say. Blanche advises Rose that she shouldn't do this to Bill and that it's unfair. She would know since there was a plot back in Golden Girls where she did this very thing to George's brother. Rose finally tells Bill about Charlie, and I was really hoping that this would be one of those amnesia cases where he hits his head and ends up living another life. It would have been so on brand for a couple from St. Olaf to think that the other is dead, with it ending up being a huge misunderstanding. Sadly, it's just Bill, and Rose gets some needed therapy, having one last conversation with him pretending to be Charlie.
Right now, what would you say?
What would I say?
What would you say to Charlie?
Charlie, the 30 years that we spent together seemed like a day. When you died, part of me died too. I love you, and I miss you.
Goodbye, Rose.
Thank you, Bill.
It was a realistic and beautiful portrayal of grief, so I'll deal with my disappointment. And lastly, I thought this moment was sweet and funny.
Every once in a while, I remember how much I need that male voice in my life, too.
You want me to get Dorothy on the phone for
Would you, darling?
I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but this is easily the best episode of this entire show, and it's basically just a Weekend at Bernie's parody. For those unaware, Weekend at Bernie's is an 80s movie about two guys who find their boss dead and then have to parade his body around to pretend that he isn't dead. A lot of sitcoms have parodied that basic premise since then. The girls are once again trying to drum up business, this time by hosting a grand reopening party 7 months after buying the hotel, so they're doing a little spring cleaning, including pouring rat poison around the dumpsters. In order to get a little extra publicity, they invite a news crew, and Rose has also invited Miami's most famous restaurant critic, Gerald Davenport, to review the hotel's restaurant, but Chewie reveals that he has beef with him after calling his food banal. Also, and this will be relevant later, a travel agent has arrived at the hotel, but his luggage was lost at the airport and is expecting it to be delivered at the hotel. Davenport arrives, still remembers being disappointed with Chewie's cooking, and just generally acts like a jerk. He sits down to eat, takes 2 bites, and stops moving. Chewie checks on him and realizes that he's dead. He tells Sophia and Rose, and they know they have to keep Davenport's death a secret to not ruin their reputation since they have so many eyes on the hotel for the grand reopening. They manage to smuggle his body into the kitchen and try to figure out what killed him. Chewie is going over all the ingredients he put into Davenport's food and pulls out the rat poison. He, of course, assumes that he must have accidentally put rat poison into the food. Roland heads upstairs to call the coroner, and Rose goes to tell Blanche. However, Blanche is currently with the news crew.
Hey, I don't see Mr. Gerald Davenport around anywhere. Did he like his food?
2 bites and he was in heaven.
Rose quickly runs back into the kitchen to warn Sophia and Chewie, and they stuff Davenport's body in the freezer. An oblivious Blanche brings the news crew into the kitchen, and Rose manages to whisper into her ear what's going on. Blanche gets the news crew to leave by lying about having a ramshackle hut in the back for her Latino workers, which they can't resist writing a story about. Blanche then asks the dumbest question you could ever ask.
But then what next?
Al Tucker, health inspector.
Blanche manages to keep the health inspector looking away from the freezer so Rose can stuff the body in a suitcase and leave it in the lobby. However, the travel agent mistakes the bag for his missing luggage, and Roland, not knowing that the body was in it, lets him take it. Blanche, Roland, and Rose try to sneak into the travel agent's room to get the body out by wrapping it in a blanket, but the travel agent finishes his shower, so Rose quickly jumps into the bed and pretends that she's there to provide him with some services. When he leaves to go get ready, they dump the body in the laundry chute to avoid the news crew. Sophia and Chewie carry the body into the lobby, but the jig is up. Everyone converges on the lobby, and the body is discovered underneath the sheet. However, thanks to some quick thinking, they pretend that he had just passed out drunk and carried the body out with no one the wiser. Good news comes later when the coroner finally gets a look at the body and reports that Davenport wasn't poisoned. He just died of a heart attack. So, Chewie didn't kill him. Plus, they got glowing reviews. All's well that ends well. Also, Sophia stole his watch. Like I said before, this is easily the best episode of Golden Palace. We were legitimately excited at all the times they almost got caught. Easily the show's peak.
Sophia's long-running frenemy, Gladys, broke her hip and gives her tickets to The Price is Right, but she can't really afford to fly out there. And a running joke begins where she tries incorrectly to guess the price of everything around her. We see some continuity in the divorce of Roland's parents, with his mother coming to visit. Roland is spending so much time with his mother that she arranges for him to go on a date with a woman named Camille. He's also been trying to get a date with Camille by sending a box of candy every week and makes this awful joke.
I've been sending her a box of candy every week just to get her to say yes.
So what does she look like?
Oh, well, when I met her, she was fine. But if she's been eating all that candy... Oh, no, what have I done, man?
It turns out Roland's mother also sent Camille candy once a week.
But don't worry, I told her it was from you.
It's not what I'm worried about, Mom.
Yikes. Chewie spent the whole day with Roland's mom and arrives back after Roland, whose date ended early. They hit it off so well that they want to have brunch the next day. The two share a peck when they return. Roland expresses his frustration over the situation, and it drives a wedge between them. This leads to us finally seeing Roland having cheesecake with the girls, and they help him work through his thoughts on the situation. The next time he sees them, Roland tries his best.
Yeah, sure.
We went to the Mecca Hotel.
What?
Don't worry. He took her to a divorce support group. They make up, and Roland agrees he needs to let his mom find her own path.
Hello there.
Hello.
I'd like a room, please.
You're not my daddy. I'll never call you daddy.
A guest appears traveling with a dog. He's the owner of a racing greyhound. It used to be a thing to race dogs. Side note, I can't remember his name, even though I rewatched the episode to write this script. Blanche flirts with him, something you'll realize hasn't happened so much. Rose tries to hype up the dog by telling her it doesn't matter if she loses. The man tells Rose that a dog that loses too many times usually gets put down. Rose refuses to go to the track after this, and someone steals the dog before the race.
Now on, you're a Dalmatian fire dog.
Rose tries to hide that she took the dog, and Sophia unknowingly eats dog treats.
This is the same trail mix I used to service at Shady Pine.
Some time passes before the man reappears and accuses Rose. This leads to the show tackling the big issue of animal neglect. After hearing the shocking statistics of racing euthanasia, Blanche and Sophia refuse to partake any longer. The dog owner returns after the race. The dog got 5th place. Rose tries to get him to give up the dog for adoption and even offers possible solutions for the overpopulation of the dog so that problems don't continue. He ends up giving the dog to Rose. Usually when the Golden Girls tackles a serious topic, it's done in a way that feels organic. This time it felt just like a lecture. And we don't see the dog again.
This time she stole the newspaper, she trampled the flowers, she knocked that woman's husband down and then licked his face.
Okay, it's my responsibility. I'll take care of it. Sophia, you're grounded.
This episode starts with Rose and Blanche thinking that Sophia has been working too hard and should take a vacation. Sophia, however, refuses. It's actually a regular recurring joke ever since Golden Girls that she's resistant to the idea of being sent away on vacation. Dorothy got her in the car to go to Shady Pines by lying to her about taking a trip. Roland tells Chewie that he had lunch with someone from the Carlton who offered him a job at higher pay than he's making at the Golden Palace. He already turned them down, but Chewie thinks he should use it to leverage a raise. Roland doesn't want to, as he's happy where he is, and asks Chewie to keep the fact that he even met someone from the Carlton a secret to avoid causing problems. Rose reveals to Blanche and Chewie that she saw Roland's lunch and is concerned about what it means. Despite his promise to Roland, Chewie immediately goes behind his back and lies to the girls, saying that Roland is actually considering taking the job, but will stay if they give him a raise. Blanche is insulted that Roland would even consider taking another job. Sophia finally relents and takes a vacation, but she takes it at the hotel just to annoy Rose and Blanche. Blanche and Rose confront Roland about the Carlton, but Roland doesn't know what Chewie told them and doesn't deny having lunch. Blanche fires him on the spot for his supposed disloyalty. Tellingly, Even after his lie gets Roland fired, Chewie seemingly has no intention of telling Blanche that he lied. In fact, he tries to take Roland's job when they start interviewing new managers. The girls ask Sophia to cut her vacation short so she can help them deal with not having Roland, but she doesn't want to. They argue about getting Roland back, since they don't like any of the applicants, but Blanche refuses, revealing that she knew Roland would never actually leave willingly, so she only fired him to force him to take a better paying job. However...
Pick up those bikes.
This bike rental place near the airport is apparently his old job, which directly contradicts the first episode where he said that he'd be back at Disney World if they lose the hotel. Chewie learns where Roland is working now, and Roland tells him that the Carlton wouldn't hire someone that had just been fired. He doesn't even know how they found out, but it was of course because Chewie blabbed again. Roland asks Chewie to not tell the others what happened because of his pride. Here's the thing. Since Chewie can't keep his mouth shut, Roland fully intends for him to actually tell them. But he actually tries to keep his promise this time and doesn't initially tell the girls. But he accidentally lets it slip anyway. They go to the bike rental hut and convince Roland to come back, promising that they'll find a way to afford to give him a raise.
Blanche returns from a trip to Chattanooga that Rose has known her to take without fail once a month for all the years she's known her. Roland tries to coax information out of her about her special gentleman friend that she visits, but no dice. A man appears in the lobby of the Golden Palace, sheepishly looking for Blanche.
Tad?
Blanche!
Tad, what are you doing here?
I came to visit you.
This is Tad, Blanche's mentally challenged brother. The portrayal of Tad is done rather tastefully aside from using outdated language. Golden Girls has a history of portraying deep subject matter in a way that many shows of the time didn't. To put it simply, Golden Girls wouldn't do something like this unless it had something to say, whereas other shows of the time would have likely used the situation just for laughs. Tad is an overall charming character, and nothing seems to be done at his expense. Blanche has never mentioned Tad to anyone, and it is abundantly clear that she is embarrassed by Tad and even ashamed. According to Blanche, this was common where she was raised, and that the family tried to hide Tad's existence nearly his whole life. Blanche's character is always the one to have a plot like this, because making the South a punching bag in America is very easy due to its general history of discrimination and judgment. Blanche tries to shove off the accusation that she doesn't care for Tad. After all, she visits once a month.
If you care about your brother so much, why didn't you ever tell us about him?
Rose spends a lot of time with Tad and treats him with respect that he usually doesn't get and isn't used to. This leads him to believe he has a crush on Rose and refuses to leave the Golden Palace like Blanche wants him to. And yes, this is another plot of Rose's basic human decency to an underserved population, causing them to claim love to her. The other being from Golden Girls, where Dorothy's lesbian friend believed she fell in love with Rose. You could say that in both cases the love was based in different regards, like the first spark of emotion after grief from Jean, and Tad being treated kindly for probably the first time in his life. But you know what they say about two nickels. Blanche doesn't want Rose to acknowledge the situation, but she still tries to help by having a conversation. Blanche starts yelling and ends up causing Tad to have an adverse reaction that is genuinely hard to watch, so we won't play a clip of that with audio. Roland helps by taking Tad into the kitchen to help him and Chewie while Blanche and Rose talk. Rose, the strong one, gives Blanche a verbal lashing that causes Blanche to admit that she is ashamed. Tad is being sent back to Chattanooga the next day, and Rose tells Tad that while they can't be boyfriend and girlfriend, they can be Valentines.
You only give a Valentine to somebody who means the world to you. Somebody you're glad to have in your life.
She even gives him a card that Charlie gave her long ago. What happens next will melt your heart.
Did I do something wrong?
No. No, Tad, I did.
She tells him he can stay at the Golden Palace more often, and that it's important that people see what a wonderful brother she has. She says they can go anywhere and do anything, and he asks to watch cartoons, and the episode fades out as most of the group watches cartoons together. The side plot is Chewie wanting and very easily getting Sophia's pizza recipe by doing a ritual to become a member of her family. He ends up refusing to use it for profit. We also learn Chewie acted in an X-rated movie at some point, and Rose pretends to be an alien during the end credits.
Space aliens found living in Miami.
Zerk, crap, Krulak.
What'd you just say?
I said, that's ridiculous.
me, Stan.
The episode begins with the girls accepting a bachelor party since the Carlton is overbooked. Of course, Roland and Chewie are excited at the prospect of hiring a stripper for the party. Shortly afterwards, a lawyer arrives and informs them that Stan has died. So, Stan was a very important character in the original series as he's Dorothy's ex-husband. He's referred to as a yut by basically everyone that knows him, and his marriage to Dorothy ended when he cheated on her with the stewardess from a flight to Hawaii.
It was her first flight. They said on arrival, give the passengers a lay. She got confused.
He got married to her, only for her to leave him a few episodes later. He got remarried a second time, but that wife also left him due to his infidelity. Dorothy had even agreed to remarry him, but changed her mind when he wanted her to sign a prenuptial agreement. He fancied himself a ladies' man, and spent most of the series as a broke novelty salesman before one of his inventions actually took off. However, he was never truly able to get over Dorothy until he went to therapy in the final season. While none of the girls particularly liked Stan, they are still saddened by his death.
What did she say? Sophia, Stan is dead.
Oh.
That doesn't stop them from making jokes at his expense after they hear that he died while making love.
There's nothing worse than dying alone. At least we know he went quickly.
An argument breaks out between Rose, Blanche, and Sophia regarding who he left money for in his will. They eventually leave Sophia alone, who prays that Stan makes it into heaven, when...
Hi, it's me, Stan.
Stan faked his death to hide from the IRS and is planning to leave the country for Madrid. This is actually at least the second time that he's been in trouble with the IRS, but he's never taken such drastic measures before. He just wanted to tell Sophia the truth because he thinks she deserves it, but tells her to not tell Dorothy until after he's gone, since he knows she wouldn't hesitate to rat him out. Meanwhile, the bachelor party that Rose booked is actually a bachelorette party, so the female stripper they hired is now useless. To make matters worse, the women seem to be really into Roland. Thus, they decide that the only solution to the problem is to have Roland strip for the women. We then see Stan's funeral, and interestingly, Dorothy isn't there. I assume B. Arthur only agreed to film the 2 episodes, but it's still weird that she's explicitly not there with no reason given. During the eulogy, Sophia becomes enraged when the priest refers to Stan as a faithful husband, and tells the whole congregation that he isn't dead. However, everyone assumes that she's just mad with grief and doesn't believe her. Back at the bachelorette party, Roland finishes dancing for the women and commiserates with the stripper about how humiliating it feels to be objectified like that. I do like that this scene was included even in an episode that isn't focused on an important topic. When the girls come back, they leave Sophia alone, still assuming that she just refuses to accept Stan's death. Stan comes in, and Sophia admits that she does love him. This is despite her telling that to him being a big breakthrough in his therapy back in season 7, but I guess the writers forgot about that. Sophia tries to convince him to tell the truth, but he leaves for Madrid, never to return. Herb Edelman, the actor that portrayed Stan, passed away in 1996.
You finally understand, don't you, honey? Stan is gone.
Yeah, Stan is gone.
Finally, I get to talk about light subject matter. It's spring break in Miami, and Roland is dedicated to cracking down on college kids taking advantage of the hotel.
No, man, there's no...
Open it, Benson.
Look, I just want to check into room 201.
The back and forth antics of Roland trying to stop the kids from sneaking in beer and extra guests is the highlight of the episode.
No, man, it's usually the real lope who's trying real hard to look young and hip, but he can't quite cut it. Thanks for the tip, officer.
We learn that Chewie never went to college.
See, back in the 60s, the government had this alternative program for minorities who couldn't afford college. What the heck was the name of it? Oh, yeah, Vietnam.
He shares that he built a 40-foot burrito with his friends before he was shipped out, trying to beat a world record. And we get another joke about him having been wasted, eating the burrito before the record. Because, haha, it's Cheech. He keeps trying to urge Blanche to let them attempt the record with the college kids. Rose's granddaughter Charlene visits the hotel, likely another daughter of Kirsten, not seen in Golden Girls. To check her status, Rose calls St. Olaf's now major airport. In Golden Girls, they had to take a small plane and then a carriage ride to get there, though it seems to be also a hair salon. The plot surrounding Charlene is that Rose has trouble accepting her as an adult. She won't even let her and her boyfriend share a room. I love this moment here because it was very forward-thinking.
Me? You brought a boy with you. Well, you know what? I think it's almost long enough. I think his hair will braid up just fine.
Charlene is considering losing her virginity to her boyfriend and wants some advice from Rose, but she refuses to give it. More fuel gets thrown on my St. Olaf as a cult theory because Rose tells a story that they suppressed sexual thoughts in the youth with physical labor.
That reminds me, I forgot to mention in one of my episodes that in St. Olaf they used to remove girls' teeth to make them less attractive to men unless your parents were on the town council. Very culty.
Things take a turn for everyone as it begins to rain, and the college kids consider heading somewhere sunny. To keep their business, Blanche finally lets them start building a 43-foot burrito. Charlene ends up going to Blanche for advice, and Rose fears what she told her, storming into Charlene's hotel room.
Oh no, I'm too late.
Oh, Grandma, you got it all wrong. We're just getting ready for our snorkeling lesson. Look at his equipment.
I will not.
Charlene leaves the hotel, and Rose doesn't know where she went. As they wait in the kitchen and chat, Roland realizes he's becoming old. Rose tells him that people grow and change, and it's Blanche that makes her realize what she said also applies to Charlene. Thankfully, Charlene arrives safely back at the hotel, and we learn that Blanche told her to wait until the time was right, which surprises Rose. Sophia helps some college kids escape, and Chewie makes the record. Sophia thinks she lost her watch in it, and it might be the watch from the dead critic in episode 18, maybe? A flash flood warning is issued, and they use the burrito to hold back the floodwaters. The college kids revolt when they learn that the actual world record was 3 feet, and not 43 feet. And this end credit scene was a cherry on top.
But from now on, no other kids are getting out of this hotel without paying their bill.
Good evening.
Have a nice evening, sir.
We will.
Well, we finally arrived. The finale of the Golden Palace. This was also the moment where we realized that the vast majority of footage from the intro just plain isn't in the show. The intro sequences in Golden Girls used a whole bunch of footage from throughout the show and spliced them together to create a montage. Golden Palace also has a montage of footage, but it's footage that isn't in the actual show. It made us wonder if there was just a lot of stuff cut or if they just filmed stuff specifically for the intro sequence. Anyway, the episode starts with Sophia telling everyone that her purse was stolen. Further elaboration reveals that she had stolen Rose's car, and that's what was stolen. Sophia's purse was just still in it. Blanche has been seeing a man named Bobby Lee, and things are starting to get serious. At the same time, Blanche's birthday is coming up, and her daughter Rebecca is coming to visit. Rebecca is an interesting case. Golden Girls had a very loose sense of continuity for the first 3 or so seasons, with plotlines being dropped and forgotten about left and right. One of the effects of that is there are basically 2 different versions of Rebecca. The first time we see her, the conflict of the episode revolves around Blanche learning that Rebecca is both overweight and stuck with a huge jerk for a boyfriend. However, the next time we see her, she's played by a completely different actress, and the previous storyline is never mentioned. Instead, her character arc involved wanting children through artificial insemination, and Blanche's difficulty accepting it. Blanche believes that Bobby Lee is going to propose to her, and she's correct. However, there's a twist. He also wants her to have his children. Problem: Blanche started menopause all the way back in the first episode of Golden Girls Season 2. We also got a confirmation during Tad's episode that Blanche, despite constantly pretending to be in her 40s, is actually in her early 60s. A little inconvenience like biology isn't going to stop Blanche Devereaux, so she agrees and will just figure it out later. Her solution is to consider surrogacy, which is of course never going to work. From what I was able to Google, it might be possible nowadays for a woman as old as 50 to be a surrogate, but it definitely wasn't possible in 1992. The characters themselves treat it as if it's possible though. When Blanche tells her plan to Rose, Rose thinks this whole thing is just a convoluted way for Blanche to avoid the reality that she's getting older. She always goes a little crazy around her birthday after all. Roland starts teaching a self-defense class for elderly women because of Sophia's carjacking, which leads to probably my favorite single joke in this entire show.
Hey, ma'am.
Sylvia.
Sylvia, and why did you take this class?
Well, my husband worries about me. I go on the bus, and he says it's too dangerous. My husband says that I'm frail and old and just asking for trouble.
And what is your specific goal with this course?
I'd like to put the bastard through a window.
Roland has Chewie pose as the attacker, but the old ladies beat the absolute hell out of him. Back in the main plot, Blanche decides to ask Rebecca if she'd be willing to donate one of her eggs. Rebecca reluctantly agrees, but states that she doesn't think this is a good idea for a woman Blanche's age. That night, Blanche has a truly bizarre dream where she not only went through with the surrogacy and was pregnant, but she convinced Rose and Sophia to do it too. Then Roland walks in pregnant, and Chewie walks in carrying the baby in his butt. The dream is enough to make Blanche realize her mistake and finally just admit that she's getting old. Sophia's purse gets returned by the valet. Rose's car wasn't stolen. Sophia just forgot that she had done valet parking. However, Sophia and the women from the self-defense class see the man holding her purse, think he's the thief, and beat the snot out of him. Blanche finally sits down with Bobby Lee to tell him the truth, but he beats her to the punch by revealing that he was just being overly hopeful. He's actually sterile, but was in denial. Blanche is happy because now she doesn't have to admit that she's getting old. She and Bobby Lee decide to stay together anyway, even though they can't have children. And, yeah, that's it. This didn't feel like a finale in the slightest, but most Golden Girls season finales, except for the final one, didn't feel climactic either. But this show was canceled after its first season, so this is all we get.
What happened? Before we talk about why Golden Palace failed, we have to talk about what was happening behind the scenes at the end of Golden Girls. Despite B. Arthur being done with the series, the other three actresses still wanted to keep going. However, NBC, its original network, didn't want to pay for a full 24-episode season of the new show since Golden Girls had begun slipping in ratings during its final season. Alternatively, CBS was willing to pay for a full 24-episode season, so they made the switch.
Golden Palace was kind of doomed from the start. Rue McClanahan was interviewed by Pop Goes the Culture, and she stated that in addition to the new network, the show was changed to a different day and time and then not promoted properly. Granted, she was wrong about the day since she said it was on Monday when it was actually on Fridays. That might have played a factor, but it really seems to be that this show had just run its course, and without B. Arthur, it just wasn't the same.
This show has largely been forgotten by history, and we feel that it really didn't deserve it. Golden Palace didn't have the warm quality of the Golden Girls, but it was still a funny romp of interesting characters. Chewie and Roland were integral to our enjoyment of the show, proving to be strong, standalone characters. They didn't always need Rose, Blanche, or Sophia to buffer their existence. Roland seems to fill the role of composure where Dorothy once stood, and Chewie is a completely new dynamic unseen in the original show. And the show provided great character development for Rose and Blanche, not so much for Sophia. Unfortunately, Golden Palace got a fairly lackluster finale and isn't really brought up in the overall discussion about the legacy of the Golden Girls, even now, 31 years after it ended. And for two people that just watched Golden Palace for the first time in 2023, we were left wishing that there was more.
But of course, you all know where this story eventually ends. On July 22nd, 2008, Estelle Getty passed away at the age of 84. On April 25th, 2009, B. Arthur passed away at the age of 86. On June 3rd, 2010, Rue McClanahan passed away at the age of 76. And on New Year's Day, 2022, Betty White passed away at the age of 99, just 17 days shy of her 100th birthday. These women were considered past their prime when the Golden Girls began, but proved every doubt wrong and became television royalty in the process. These girls provided endless laughs for the 7 years the show was on TV, the next 30 years, and probably for decades more to come. So I think we can speak for all fans when we say to you girls, thank you for being a friend.